The first thing Isabella heard was the snap of a twig under a boot that wasn't human. It was a sound that didn't belong in the dense, moon-silvered woods behind the diner where she worked the late shift. It was too deliberate, too heavy. The second thing was the low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the cold November air, raising every hair on her arms. She froze, her breath pluming in a frantic white cloud, the greasy scent of fried food on her apron suddenly smothered by the raw, wild smell of damp earth, pine, and something else, something musky and predatory. Run, the command was primal, a scream in her blood, but her legs were locked. Another growl, closer this time from her left. She turned her head slowly, the muscles in her neck screaming in protest. Between the skeletal branches of an oak, 2 points of amber light glowed. Eyes. They were fixed on her with an intelligence that was utterly alien and terrifyingly familiar. "Little girls shouldn't be out so late," a voice purred from the darkness to her right. It was a smooth, cruel sound, like silk over a blade. A man stepped into a sliver of moonlight. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a smile that didn't reach his cold, assessing eyes. He wore expensive-looking dark clothes that seemed to drink the light. These woods belong to the pack. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. I was just taking out the trash. I work at the diner." Her own voice sounded thin, childlike. She hated it. "Isabella," he said, tasting her name. It wasn't a question. He knew it. How did he know it? A pretty little human all alone. He took a step forward, and the creature in the shadows to her left mirrored him, a hulking, dark shape resolving into a wolf the size of a small bear. Its lips were peeled back from teeth that looked like shards of polished bone. "Dominic, that's enough." The new voice was a shockwave. It didn't purr, it commanded. It was deep, textured with gravel and authority, and it rolled through the clearing with the force of a physical blow. The giant wolf, Dominic's companion, whined and lowered its head. From the opposite tree line, he emerged. He moved with a lethal, silent grace that made Dominic seem clumsy. He was taller, his shoulders wider, his presence carving a space of absolute dominance in the night. His hair was the color of dark wheat, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes were the most startling shade of electric blue she had ever seen. They weren't glowing like the wolf's, but they burned with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. They locked onto hers, and the world narrowed to that single, searing connection. A jolt, white-hot and terrifying, shot through her core. It wasn't fear. It was something infinitely more dangerous. It was a pull, a recognition so profound it felt like a memory slamming into place. Her skin prickled. Her blood sang. A single, impossible word echoed in the hollow of her mind. Mine. His nostrils flared, and those blue eyes widened a fraction. A ripple went through him, a barely contained surge of power that made the very air tremble. He stared at her as if she were a ghost, a miracle, a wound. "Micah," Dominic said, the smoothness gone from his voice, replaced by a sharp edge of surprise and something uglier, resentment. "I was just welcoming our new neighbor to the territory." "By hunting her?" Micah's voice was deceptively quiet, but it carried the promise of violence. He didn't look away from Isabella. "Leave, now, take your beta with you." He said beta like it was an insult. Dominic's cold smile returned, tighter now. "As you command, Alpha." The title was laced with venom. He shot a last, lingering look at Isabella, a look that promised this wasn't over, and melted back into the shadows. The massive wolf followed, but not before issuing one last, submissive whine in Micah's direction. And then they were alone. The silence was deafening, thick with unsaid things and that impossible, humming connection. Micah took a step toward her. Isabella stumbled back, her heel catching on a root. She would have fallen, but he was there in a blur of motion, his hand closing around her forearm to steady her. The contact was an electric shock. A gasp tore from her throat. Heat, pure and dizzying, flooded up her arm and spread through her whole body. His grip was iron, but it didn't hurt. It felt anchoring. Right. His eyes blazed, the blue darkening with a storm of emotion. Shock, disbelief. A raw, hungry possessiveness that should have sent her running. He released her as if burned, taking a full step back. He ran a hand through his hair, a strangely human gesture of agitation at odds with his terrifying grace. "You're human." He said it like an accusation, like a prayer, like a curse. "Last I checked," Isabella managed, rubbing her arm where his touch still burned. Her voice was stronger now, fueled by a confusing mix of terror and defiance. "Who are you people? What kind of dogs do you train?" A low, humorless sound escaped him. It was almost a laugh. "You have no idea, do you?" He studied her face, searching for something. "Isabella, your name is Isabella." You heard him say it. I knew it before he spoke. His gaze was a physical weight. "What are you doing in Blackwood Creek?" "I live here. I moved here 2 weeks ago to get away from things." She didn't know why she added that. She never talked about it. Little did I know. Running to a sleepy mountain town was my first mistake. His expression shifted, the intensity hardening into something like grim resolve. "You need to leave. Tonight. Pack your things and drive. Don't stop until you're 100 miles from here." The stark command, the urgency in his tone, cut through the strange pull she felt. "Why? Because of that creep Dominic. I can call the police." "The police," he repeated, and the sheer, bleak amusement in his voice was more frightening than any growl. "Isabella, look at me. Really look. You felt it, you know." He took another step closer, invading her space. The scent of him, storm wind, cedar, and wild, untamed power, wrapped around her. "This territory is contested. My pack is unstable. Dominic is challenging my authority. And you..." His eyes dropped to her throat, where her pulse was fluttering wildly. "You are a complication that could get you killed." "What does that mean? What am I to you?" The question was out before she could stop it, born from that deep, illogical knowing. He went utterly still. The air grew heavy, charged. The distant hoot of an owl ceased. In the profound quiet, she heard the faint, terrifying sound of bones shifting, of a low, internal growl that came from him. "That," a new feminine voice cut in, sharp with alarm, "is the question of the century." A woman with fiery red hair and a wary, intelligent face stepped into the clearing. She moved with a fighter's caution, her eyes, a warm brown, darting between Micah and Isabella. She was beautiful, but in a sharp, capable way, dressed in practical jeans and a leather jacket. "Micah, the perimeter patrol felt your spike. What's going on?" Her gaze settled on Isabella and her eyes widened. "Oh, moon and stars. You have got to be kidding me." "Bianca," Micah said, his voice a warning rumble. "Not now. Not now," Bianca hissed, stepping closer. "Micah, she's human. And the bond, I can smell it sparking off both of you from 50 yards away. This is a disaster waiting to happen. Dominic will use this. You know he will." "I said not now." The alpha power rolled out of him, a wave of pure dominance that made Isabella's knees weak. Bianca flinched, lowering her head in immediate, instinctive submission, though her eyes still flashed with protest. Mate bond. The words echoed in the chaos of Isabella's mind. They meant nothing to her, everything to them. "Who is she, Micah?" A man appeared beside Bianca, taller, lankier, with a kind, concerned face that was currently etched with worry. He had sandy hair and gentle green eyes that swept over Isabella with open curiosity, not threat. This was Andrew, her mind supplied uselessly. "She's leaving," Micah stated, his voice final. He looked back at Isabella, and the conflict in his eyes was a tempest. The possessiveness was still there, warring with a desperate, protective urge to send her away. Andrew, you will escort her to her home. You will wait while she packs one bag. You will then follow her car to the county line and ensure she keeps driving. Do not engage. Do not be seen. Micah, you can't just. Bianca started. I am your alpha, he roared. And this time, the power in his voice was mingled with something else. A raw, gut-deep pain that silenced even Bianca. The sound wasn't entirely human. It echoed with the promise of fangs and fury. He closed his eyes, mastering himself. When he opened them, they were glowing faintly, a luminous, terrifying blue. This is for her protection. Until I deal with Dominic, until the pack is secure, she is a target. A weakness. The last word was torn from him, agonized. He looked at Isabella one last time, and his voice dropped to a rough, private whisper that vibrated in her bones. If you stay, you will die, or worse, you have to trust me. Then he turned and was gone, vanishing into the forest with preternatural speed, leaving her standing there, cold, confused, and utterly hollow, as if he'd ripped a part of her away with him. Andrew approached her slowly, hands raised in a placating gesture. Come on, he said softly, his voice a balm after the storm of Micah and Dominic. Let's get you home. I'm sorry about all of this. Bianca stood her ground, arms crossed, watching Isabella with a mix of pity and frustration. This isn't over, she muttered, more to herself than anyone. The bond doesn't just switch off. He can send her to the other side of the world, and it won't matter. She won't matter, not to him, not anymore. Isabella numbly allowed Andrew to guide her back toward the dim lights of the diner parking lot, Bianca trailing behind, a silent, angry shadow. Her mind was reeling. Mate bond, weakness, target, the glowing eyes, the wolf the size of a bear, Micah's impossible speed, and the power that vibrated the air around him. They weren't just dangerous men. They were something else entirely. And for reasons she couldn't begin to fathom, their world had just decided to crash into hers. Andrew's old pickup truck was parked behind the diner. I'll follow you, he said gently. Just lead the way. In a daze, Isabella walked to her beat-up sedan. She fumbled with the keys, her hands trembling. As she slid into the driver's seat, the interior light illuminated the rearview mirror. And she saw them. Not in the parking lot, in the dense tree line across the road. Dozens of pairs of glowing eyes, amber, gold, a few icy blue, watching from the darkness. The entire forest was alive with silent, staring wolves. The pack, watching her, judging the human their alpha had just claimed and then cast out. Her blood ran cold. She started the car, her tires screeching as she pulled out onto the empty road. Andrew's headlights flicked on behind her. In her mirror, the constellation of glowing eyes slowly winked out, one by one, swallowed by the hungry dark. But as she drove, a strange heat began to bloom in her chest, a warmth that defied the cold fear in her gut. It was a pull, a compass needle swinging relentlessly north, back toward the woods, back toward him. It was an ache, a longing for something she'd never had. And with a sudden, terrifying clarity, she knew Andrew was right. It didn't matter how far she drove. What happened next changed everything. She rounded a bend in the winding mountain road. A massive black SUV was parked sideways, completely blocking both lanes. Dominic leaned against the hood, arms crossed, his smile a white slash in the darkness. Standing next to him was the giant wolf, its gaze fixed on her approaching car. Panic seized her. She slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt just feet from the SUV's bumper. In her rear view, Andrew's truck screeched to a stop, and she saw him leap out, his form already beginning to blur and distort in the moonlight. But Dominic didn't even look at him. He pushed off the SUV and walked slowly toward her driver's side window. He tapped on the glass with one knuckle. Rolling down the window was a mistake. She knew it instantly. But her body moved on autopilot, frozen by those cold, predatory eyes. "Change of plans, little human," Dominic said, his voice sweet as poison. "You see, an alpha rejecting his true mate, that's a sign of profound weakness. A crack in the foundation. And cracks," he leaned down, his breath fogging the cold glass, "are how you bring a kingdom down." He reached a hand toward her. And from the woods to her left, a roar of pure, unadulterated rage shattered the night. It was the sound of a beast unleashed, of a bond betrayed, of an alpha's wrath. Micah erupted from the trees, not in human form, but as a colossal wolf of midnight black and silver, his blue eyes blazing like fallen stars. He was fury incarnate, and he was headed straight for Dominic. That was my first mistake, thinking I could ever escape. Isabella watched, paralyzed, as the two forces of nature collided in an explosion of snarls, tearing fangs, and the horrific, visceral sound of ripping flesh. The battle for the pack, for the territory, for her, had just begun in the middle of the road, and she was trapped at its very center. The world dissolved into a chaos of snarls, cracking bone, and the violent thud of massive bodies colliding. Isabella's scream died in her throat, trapped by the sheer, primal terror of what was happening on the road in front of her. Dominic had called him weak, and now Micah was killing him for it. The two wolves were a blur of midnight black and storm gray fur under the cold moonlight. Micah moved with a terrifying, efficient grace, his attacks not wild but calculated, aiming to disable and dominate. Dominic, larger but perhaps slower, fought with a brutal rage, his jaws snapping where Micah's throat had been a second before. The sound was horrific, a deep, guttural growling that vibrated in Isabella's chest, punctuated by pained yelps and the wet tear of claw meeting flesh. Crunch, Isabella flinched, her hands flying to her mouth. That was bone. She didn't know whose. The giant beta wolf, which had been standing sentinel, let out a low whine of distress. It took a hesitant step forward, muscles coiled, but a single, thunderous roar from Micah, even as he wrestled Dominic to the asphalt, froze it in place. The command in that sound was absolute. Stand down. This was alpha business. "Isabella, get back in the car." Andrew's voice, strained and urgent, cut through the animal din. He was half-shifted, a monstrous hybrid of man and wolf standing between her and the worst of the violence, his own claws extended. His kind eyes were now wide with alarm. "You need to go, now." But her feet were rooted. Her gaze was locked on Micah. Every slash of Dominic's claws across his shoulder made her own skin burn in sympathy. Every successful dodge and retaliatory strike from Micah sent a jolt of fierce, illogical pride through her. The bond was a live wire in her core, humming with his fury, his pain, his absolute focus. She felt it all, a terrifying echo in her own soul. What happened next changed everything. With a powerful surge, Micah pinned Dominic, his massive paw on the challenger's throat. Dominic struggled, his legs scrabbling against the road, but the pressure was inexorable. Micah's head lowered, his muzzle inches from Dominic's face. The growl that rumbled out wasn't just sound, it was a language. A final, deadly warning. The fight left Dominic all at once. His body went limp in a posture of submission, head turning to expose the vulnerable line of his neck. A high, submissive whine escaped him. The message was clear. I yield. Micah held the position for 3 long, heart-stopping seconds. The entire forest seemed to hold its breath. Then, he stepped back, releasing Dominic. He didn't look at the defeated wolf again. Instead, his great, shaggy head swung toward Isabella. Those amber eyes found hers, glowing with an inner fire. They were full of a storm of emotion, possession, fury, and a deep, gut-wrenching regret. In them, she saw the man from the woods, the one who had touched her face and told her to run. The moment shattered as Dominic, still in wolf form, scrambled to his feet. He was bleeding from a deep gash on his flank and favoring one foreleg. He cast a single, venomous look, not at Micah, but directly at Isabella, before limping into the tree line, his giant beta falling in silently behind him. The threat in that look was a promise. This isn't over. Silence rushed back in, broken only by the ragged sound of Isabella's breathing and the soft drip of blood on asphalt. Micah stood panting in the center of the road, his sides heaving. The majestic black fur was matted and dark in places. Slowly, the air around him began to shimmer, like heat rising off summer pavement. There was a sound of grinding, shifting bone and a soft, sighing rush of fur receding. The wolf condensed, folded in on itself, and then Micah was there, kneeling naked on the cold road. Isabella gasped, averting her eyes instinctively, but the image was seared into her mind. He was powerfully built, every muscle defined and now crisscrossed with fresh, red claw marks that were already beginning to knit closed. The healing was visible, a surreal, impossible thing to witness. "Andrew," Micah's voice was hoarse, graveled from the growls. "Report to Bianca. Secure the western perimeter. He will lick his wounds, but he may not lick them alone." Andrew, who had also completed his shift back to human form, clutching a bundle of clothes from the car, nodded sharply. "Yes, Alpha." He gave Isabella a last, worried glance before melting into the forest with preternatural speed. And then they were alone. The scent of pine, blood, and wild, electric power filled the air. Isabella couldn't move. Micah rose to his feet, seemingly unconcerned with his nudity, his attention wholly on her. He took a step forward. She took an involuntary step back, her spine pressing against the cold metal of her car door. He stopped, pain flashing in his eyes. "You're afraid of me." It wasn't a question. You're a werewolf," she whispered, the words finally breaking free. That's not real." "It is real. I am real. This," he gestured between them, his voice dropping to a raw whisper, "is real. You feel it. Don't lie to me, Isabella. I can hear your heart. I can smell your fear and your pull." She shook her head, a frantic denial. "I don't know what you're talking about. I just want to go home." "You have no home now," he said, and the stark truth in his words was a physical blow. "Not in Blackwood Creek. Not if you are not under my protection. Dominic has seen you. He has scented the bond, however new and fragile. He will use you to get to me, to break me." "Then let me leave," she cried, desperation clawing at her throat. "You told me to leave. I was leaving. Why did you stop him? Why did you fight him if you just want me gone?" He closed the distance between them in 2 swift strides. He didn't touch her, but his proximity was overwhelming, a wall of heat and intensity. "Because the thought of his teeth on your skin made me feral," he snarled, the animal still close to the surface. "Because my wolf does not understand politics or challenges. It only knows one thing: you are ours." The word hung in the air, possessive and absolute. Isabella's own anger, born of terror and confusion, flared. "I am not a thing to be owned. I'm a person. I moved here for a quiet life, and now I'm caught in some animal turf war." A low growl trickled from him, but he mastered it, his jaw clenching. "You are my mate, the other half of my soul, a gift from the moon goddess that I do not deserve and cannot claim." He ran a hand through his dark hair, smearing a streak of blood across his temple. The conflict in him was palpable, a war she could feel raging in her own chest. "If only I had known you were here, human and unprotected, I would have." "You would have what?" she challenged, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. "I would have kept you safe from the beginning, or I would have never let you come here at all." He looked away, toward the woods where his pack lurked, where his enemy was retreating. My rejection in the woods was for your safety. A true mate rejected is a tragedy, but a dead mate is an eternity of hell. I thought if I sent you away, Dominic would have no weapon. I was wrong. He will simply hunt you beyond our borders." The consequence of his words settled over her like a lead weight. There was no out. Running was futile. Staying was deadly. "So what do I do?" Her voice was small, defeated. He finally looked at her again, his gaze softening into something unbearably weary. "You come with me, to the pack house. It is the only place I can guarantee your safety. My wolf will not allow anything else now. The secret is out." "The pack house," she repeated, a new dread forming. "Where they all are, the ones who were watching me from the trees. They are my family, my responsibility, and they will feel the bond as strongly as Dominic does. They will know what you are to me." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. His fingers, when they brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, were surprisingly gentle. A shockwave of warmth, of rightness, shot through her at the contact, undermining all her fear. "I will not force you, Isabella, but I am begging you. Come with me, let me protect you, for tonight." The internal battle was tearing her apart. The logical part of her screamed that getting into a car with a naked, wounded werewolf was the pinnacle of insanity. The instinctual part, the part that had recognized him in the woods, sang at his touch and trembled at the thought of him walking away. The sound of an engine, distant but approaching from the town, decided it. Headlights would crest the mountain road soon. Micah heard it too, his head cocking. "Isabella, now!" Swallowing hard, she nodded. She fumbled with the car door, slid into the driver's seat, and unlocked the passenger side. Micah retrieved his own bundle of clothes from the ditch, where he'd left them before shifting and dressed with swift, efficient motions, barely getting his jeans on before the first glow of headlights appeared around the bend behind them. "Drive," he said, sliding into the seat beside her. "Take the next forestry road on the left. I'll guide you." Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. The car coughed to life. As she pulled away, the pickup truck from town passed them, its driver oblivious to the blood on the road, and the king of beasts now sitting quietly in the passenger seat of a beat-up sedan. She turned where he instructed, onto a narrow, unpaved track that plunged into deeper darkness. The trees closed in around them, branches scraping the sides of the car like skeletal fingers. They drove in silence for 10 minutes, the tension a thick fog between them. She could feel his eyes on her profile. "The bond," he said quietly, breaking the silence. "It will get stronger. You will feel what I feel, especially the strong emotions. My wolf will become more attuned to you, your needs, your distress. It is invasive. I am sorry for that. You keep apologizing," she murmured, focusing on the treacherous road. "But you're not sorry you found me." He was silent for a long moment. "No," he admitted, the word rough with honesty. "I am not. Even if it destroys me, I could never be sorry for that." Before she could process that, the trees opened up. They emerged into a large, moonlit clearing dominated by a sprawling, rustic lodge built of massive logs and dark stone. It looked ancient and powerful, nestled against the shoulder of the mountain. Lights glowed warmly from its many windows, but the surrounding woods were full of watching, gleaming eyes. The Blackwood Pack House. As she pulled to a stop in the circular gravel drive, the front door opened. Bianca stood silhouetted in the light, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Behind her, in the shadows of the porch, other figures moved. "Stay close to me," Micah said, his voice dropping into an alpha's command. "Do not look anyone directly in the eyes unless I tell you to. It can be seen as a challenge." "A challenge? I'm a human." "You are the alpha's mate," he corrected, his tone leaving no room for argument. That makes you royalty here, and a target, remember that. He opened his door and stepped out. Every set of eyes in the woods and on the porch fixed on him, then slid to her. The weight of their collective gaze was suffocating. It was curiosity, suspicion, hostility, and all mixed together. Isabella took a deep, shuddering breath. This was it. No going back. She opened her door and stepped out into the cold mountain air, the gravel crunching under her shoes. As she moved to stand beside Micah, a low, unified murmur rippled through the pack, a soft chorus of whispers and acknowledging growls. Bianca stepped forward, her gaze sharp. "Alpha, you're wounded, and you've brought the human." Her eyes flicked to Isabella. "The mate. She is under my protection, Bianca. By the moon and by my blood," Micah declared, his voice carrying across the clearing. "Any who threaten her, touch her, or disrespect her will answer to me. Is that understood?" A wave of submissive nods and lowered heads answered him. But Isabella saw it, the flicker of resentment in a few eyes, the tightened jaw of a warrior near the door. Not everyone was happy about this. Micah placed a guiding hand on the small of her back, the contact sending that now familiar jolt through her system. "Come inside." They walked toward the lodge, up the broad steps, past Bianca, who finally dipped her head in a stiff nod. As they crossed the threshold into the roaring heat of a great stone fireplace and the scent of wood smoke and wild things, Isabella felt the door close behind her with a sense of finality. She was in the wolf's den. Micah led her through a large common room where pack members sat on fur-strewn furniture, all conversation dying as they passed. He didn't stop until they reached a heavy wooden door at the end of a hallway. He opened it, revealing a spacious, sparsely furnished bedroom. "This is my room. You will stay here tonight. No one will enter." He turned to her, his exhaustion now evident. The adrenaline was fading, and the wounds, though healed, had taken their toll. "I will have food brought. You should rest. Where will you be?" The question escaped her before she could stop it, laced with a fear of being alone in this place. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "On the other side of this door, guarding it." He reached out, his knuckles grazing her cheekbone so softly it was almost not a touch at all. The bond sang, a quiet, yearning note. "Sleep, Isabella. You are safe tonight." He left, closing the door with a soft click. The lock didn't engage. She was not a prisoner. But as she stood in the center of the Alpha's room, surrounded by his scent, pine and snow, and something uniquely Micah, she knew the truth. She was something far more complex than a prisoner. The revelation came as she sank onto the edge of the large bed, her body trembling with delayed shock. The bond wasn't just a feeling. It was a tether. And as she sat there, alone in the silent room, a sudden foreign wave of agony and fury, not her own, washed over her, so intense it stole her breath and brought tears to her eyes. It was coming from Micah, just beyond the door. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. A moment later, a deafening, earth-shaking roar of pure alpha rage shattered the night's silence, followed by the sound of splintering wood and Bianca's sharp shout. "Alpha, no!" Isabella was on her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs. The pain in the bond spiked, sharp and desperate. Without thinking, driven by an instinct she couldn't name, she yanked the door open. The scene in the hallway froze her blood. Micah was in mid-shift, fur erupting along his spine, his face contorted in a snarl of unimaginable pain. Bianca and Andrew were trying to hold him back, but he was a force of nature. And he was staring at a young, trembling pack member who held a burning piece of parchment in his hand. "Alpha, I'm sorry," the boy whimpered. "It just arrived, by crow." Bianca saw Isabella, her eyes wide with panic. "Get back inside." But it was too late. Micah's blazing amber eyes found hers. In them she saw not just rage, but a soul-deep horror. He threw back his head and let out a howl that was the sound of a heart breaking. The pack member, trembling, dropped the parchment. It fluttered to the floor at Isabella's feet, the elegant, fiery script still smoldering. With a dread colder than the mountain night, she looked down and read the message that had shattered the Alpha's control. It was a single line, a declaration of war from a rival pack. "We have scented your mate on the wind, Micah of Blackwood. The Shadowfen pack is coming for her." The howl that tore from Micah's throat wasn't a sound of this world. It was the shriek of a mountain cracking, the roar of a star-going supernova. It was pure, undiluted rage. "The Shadowfen pack, they've scented her." The words echoed in the sudden, suffocating silence of the great room, a silence that was immediately swallowed by chaos. "War," Bianca breathed, her hand flying to the dagger at her hip. "He's declared war." Around the room, pack members erupted. Some shifted partially, claws tearing from fingertips. Others shouted, a cacophony of fear and fury. The giant wolf who had been with Dominic let out a low, uncertain whine, flattening itself to the floorboards. All I could do was stand there, frozen on the stairs, the taste of my own terror metallic in my mouth. "They're coming for me." "Silence." Micah's command wasn't a shout. It was a pressure wave. It hit the room like a physical force, slamming jaws shut and forcing shifting bones back into place. The only sound was the ragged pull of his own breath and the frantic hammering of my heart, which I was certain everyone could hear. He stood in the center of the room, a king surrounded by the ruins of his peace. The gashes from his fight with Dominic were stark against his skin, but he seemed utterly unaware of them. His gaze, molten gold and terrifying, swept the assembly before landing on me. It pinned me to the stair. "Andrew," Micah said, his voice a blade of ice. Andrew stepped forward instantly. "Alpha, you and Bianca secure the perimeter, triple the patrols. I want scent markers saturated for 5 miles out. Nothing gets through unseen." Bianca nodded, her expression grimly satisfied. This was a threat she understood. "And the Shadowfen scouts? Capture them if you can, kill them if you must." The order was given without a flicker of emotion. "Go." Now. They moved, a blur of motion, the front door booming shut behind them. The sound made me jump. Micah's attention didn't waver from me. "The rest of you," he addressed the room, his tone leaving no room for dissent. "Prepare. Armory. Infirmary, guard rotations. Our mate is under this roof. She is the heart of the pack now. You defend her with your lives, or you answer to me." The word mate hung in the air, a decree. There were stiff nods, a few bowed heads, but the hostility I'd felt earlier was now buried under a layer of grim necessity. An external enemy had a way of unifying a fractured house. For now. As the pack dispersed into organized frenzy, Micah finally moved. He crossed the room in 6 powerful strides and mounted the stairs. I wanted to back away, to run back to the sparse safety of his bedroom, but my legs were stone. He stopped 1 step below me, forcing me to look down at him. Even then, he exuded dominance. "You heard," he stated. I managed a jerky nod. "They want me because of what I am to you." "What you are," he corrected, his voice dropping, "is mine. The bond is a beacon. Dominic's challenge, the blood spilled, it sent up a flare. The Shadowfen Alpha has a keen nose. He smelled a vulnerability." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "He is mistaken." The possessive fury in his eyes should have comforted me. He was a fortress. Instead, it chilled me to the bone. I was the crack in his walls. "What happens now?" "Now," he said, reaching for me. I flinched. He paused, his hand hovering in the air between us, before his fingers gently but irrevocably closed around my wrist. His touch was a brand. "Now you learn, and you stay alive." He led me not back to the bedroom, but down a different hallway, away from the main commotion. The sounds of the pack preparing for war became muffled. the clang of metal gruff orders, the low thrum of anxious energy. Here, it was quieter, just the whisper of our footsteps on old wood and the roaring in my ears. We entered a room that was clearly a study. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves made of dark timber groaned under the weight of leather-bound volumes and rolled maps. A massive desk, its surface scarred and stained with age, dominated the space. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, the only element of warmth in a room that felt like a strategic command center. The air smelled of old paper, wood smoke, and him, that wild, stormy scent of pine and power. Micah released me and went to a large map pinned to a board. It was a detailed topographic rendering of the mountains. "This," he said, tapping a marked area, "is Blackwood territory. From the peak of Mount Talon, down through the Silverun River Valley, to the edge of the human town." His finger slid east, to a region marked with dark, cross-hatched shadows. "This is the Shadowfen, bog, treacherous canyons, dead forests. They are a vicious pack, led by a brute named Kale. They thrive on conquest." I wrapped my arms around myself. "And they just declare they're coming to take someone, like I'm a piece of land." His golden eyes found mine. "A true mate bond is more valuable than land. It is power solidified. For an alpha, it brings stability, strength, a legacy. For a rival, capturing a true mate is the ultimate humiliation. It breaks the bonded alpha, it can break the pack." He looked back at the map, his shoulders tense. "Kale doesn't just want you, he wants to use you to shatter me." The cold in my bones deepened. I was a weapon, a key to destruction. "So I'm a liability, Dominic was right." In a flash, Micah was before me. He didn't touch me, but his proximity was overwhelming. Dominic was a fool. A liability is a weakness that cannot be turned to strength. He seemed to struggle with the words, a man more accustomed to commands than confessions. "The bond is a vulnerability, yes, but it is also a source of strength I have never known. I felt it the moment I saw you, a completeness. It is why I fought Dominic. It is why I will burn the Shadowfen to ash before I let them touch you." His words were a confession, raw and terrifying. I saw the conflict in him again, the fierce, possessive wolf warring with the strategic, burdened alpha. The man who wanted to claim his mate, and the leader who knew that claim painted a target on her back. "What do I do?" My voice was small in the grand room. "You stay here, in this house. You learn our ways, you let yourself be protected." He said it like it was simple. "I'm not a werewolf, Micah. I'm a human who waited tables 3 days ago. I can't fight. I can't scent markers or whatever. I'm just the thing everyone is fighting over." The helplessness rose in me, bitter and choking. A new voice spoke from the doorway. "Then stop being a thing." We both turned. Bianca leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed. She had returned swiftly from her patrol assignment. Her expression was unreadable. "Bianca!" Micah's voice held a warning. She pushed off the frame and walked in, ignoring him, her eyes on me. "The Alpha has declared you mate. The pack, however reluctantly, will obey. But respect, that's not decreed, it's earned. Right now, you're a scent on the wind, a pretty human prize. To the pack, you're a symbol of the war they didn't ask for." "Your point," Micah growled. "My point, Alpha, is that if she remains a symbol, she will always be a target, inside these walls and out." Bianca stopped a few feet from me. "You want to not feel like a liability, then become an asset. Learn. Not just maps and territory lines. Learn us. Our hierarchy, our rituals, our strengths. Understand what it means to be at the center of a pack." I stared at her, shocked. This was the woman who had looked at me with pure disdain hours before. "Why would you help me?" Her lips thinned. "Not for you, for him, for the pack. A divided house falls. If you are truly his mate, then your survival is our survival. And I'd rather you be a survivor than a victim waiting in a locked room. She glanced at Micah. With your permission, Alpha, I can start with the basics. History, structure. Enough so she doesn't accidentally insult a senior warrior and get her throat ripped out before the Shadowfen get the chance. The tension between them was palpable. Micah studied his warrior, then me. I saw the calculation in his eyes. Bianca was right, and he knew it. Keeping me ignorant was just another form of danger. Do it, he finally said, the words gruff. But within the house, and you are responsible for her safety. Bianca gave a sharp nod. Understood. Micah turned back to me. The ferocity in his gaze softened just for a fraction. I have to go. There are defenses to coordinate, scouts to debrief. He lifted his hand, and this time I didn't flinch. He cupped my cheek, his thumb brushing my skin. The contact sent that now familiar electric current through me, a dizzying mix of fear and a deep, unwanted pull. The bond will try to pull at you. The distance will ache. Ignore it. Trust Bianca. And then he was gone, moving with that preternatural speed, leaving me alone with the warrior who resented my existence. Bianca let out a long breath. Right, lesson 1. The Blackwood Pack is not a democracy, it's a monarchy with teeth. Micah is the absolute authority. Beneath him is the beta, a position currently vacant since Dominic's demotion. A faint, smug smile touched her lips. Then the senior warriors like me. Then the hunters, trackers, healers, and so on. At the very bottom are the omegas, the submissives who maintain the domestic peace. Where do I fit? I asked, dreading the answer. Nowhere and everywhere. She began to pace. As the Alpha's declared mate, you outrank everyone but Micah. In theory. In practice, without your own strength or their respect, that rank is paper-thin. They will test you. They will challenge you in small ways. You must hold your ground. How? I asked, desperation creeping in. You have the Alpha's favor. Use his scent. Use his authority. When you walk, imagine his hand on your back. When you speak, remember his decree. She stopped and looked at me critically. You're terrified. Good. Fear keeps you alive. But don't let them see you tremble. They're wolves. They smell weakness like blood. For the next hour, she drilled me. Pack lineage, major alliances and feuds, the significance of the moon phases to their strength. It was a torrent of information, a whole hidden world crashing down on me. I listened, clinging to the details like lifelines. If this was my new reality, I had to navigate it. The lesson was interrupted by a distant, echoing howl from the woods. It was followed by another, closer. A signal. Bianca's head snapped up, her body going taut. Report, she muttered, moving to the window. We heard the front door crash open, the sound of heavy boots and panicked voices. Alpha, to the gate. Micah appeared in the hallway from another room, his expression thunderous. Bianca and I rushed out of the study. The great room was filling again with pack members, all facing a young, bloodied warrior leaning heavily on another. The scent of copper and foreign musk filled the air. Speak, Micah commanded. The wounded warrior gasped. Shadowfen scouts a full skirmish line, Alpha, at the eastern bluffs. They're not hiding. They are taunting, they said. He coughed, blood speckling his lips. They said to send out the human, send out the mate. Or they'll start picking off the perimeter guards, one by one, and send us the pieces. A roar of outrage went up from the pack. Micah's face was a mask of cold, deadly calm. But I saw it, the flicker of utter panic in his eyes before he shuttered it. They were here. The war wasn't coming. It had begun. They've drawn a line, Bianca said quietly beside me, her hand on her dagger. They want to lure him out away from the fortified house, to separate him from you. Micah's gaze found me across the crowded, angry room. The pull of the bond was a physical yank, a cord tied around my ribs trying to drag me to him. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of destiny. "Then we cross it." He began barking orders, deploying warriors, a general marshalling his forces. The pack house became a hive of violent readiness. As he headed for the door, flanked by his most fearsome fighters, he looked back at me one last time. His words from our first meeting echoed in the new context, now a dreadful promise. "You can't run from this." Bianca shoved me toward the stairs. "To his room. Now lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me or Andrew. Do you understand?" I stumbled backwards, my heart a trapped bird. "Where are you going?" "To fight," she said, drawing her dagger. Its edge gleamed in the firelight. "To protect our Alpha's heart." She ran after the others, leaving me alone at the foot of the stairs. The front door stood open, a yawning mouth leading to the dark, howling night. The sounds of battle, snarls, crashes, pained yelps, began to filter through the trees, far too close. They were fighting, for me. Trembling, I turned and fled up the stairs, down the hall, and into Micah's bedroom. I slammed the door shut, locking it, my back pressed against the solid wood. His scent enveloped me, a comforting prison. I slid down to the floor, wrapping my arms around my knees, trying to be small, trying to be silent. The battle raged in the distance. Every snarl made me flinch, every silence was worse. I don't know how long I sat there, time measured in heartbeats and distant cries. Then a new sound, a soft scratch at the window. My blood froze. The bedroom was on the second floor. I slowly, so slowly, turned my head. Pressed against the glass, distorted by the pain, was a monstrous, furred face. Not a wolf's. Something bigger, with intelligent, cruel amber eyes that glowed in the dark. It was a werewolf in a horrific half-shift, saliva dripping from jagged teeth as it grinned at me. Its claws tapped lightly on the window pane. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It wasn't at the eastern bluffs, it was here. The taunt, the skirmish, it had all been a diversion. The lock on the bedroom door wouldn't matter. The amber eyes held mine, and a low, guttural voice, muffled by glass but chillingly clear, slithered into the room. "Little mate," it whispered. "Come out. We've come such a long way to play." The thing at the window breathed, a wet, rattling sound. Its claw, black and curved like a sickle, scraped down the glass. Screech. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage of bone. She was frozen, one hand still outstretched toward the door handle Micah had locked. The monster's eyes, a sickly sulfur yellow in the gloom, held hers. It smiled, cracked lips peeling back from gums too full of jagged teeth. This was no wolf. This was a nightmare given flesh, caught between forms. "Little mate," it hissed, voice like gravel grinding in oil. "The air smells of your fear, so sweet, come out. Kale only wants to talk." Her paralysis broke. She stumbled back from the door, from the window, until her legs hit the edge of Micah's heavy bed. The scent of him, pine and winter earth, was everywhere, a taunting reminder of the protector who was miles away, drawn off by a clever diversion. The eastern border. Bianca's grim lesson echoed in her skull. War isn't just claws and teeth. It's strategy. It's exploiting weakness. This thing was here because of her. She was the weakness. A low, thunderous growl erupted not from the window, but from the hallway outside the bedroom door. A snarl answered it, followed by a sickening crunch of wood and a yelp of pain. The fight was already inside the house. The shadowfin wolf at the window chuckled, a horrid, gurgling sound. "Too late for them, only you matter." It drew back its fist, muscles coiling beneath patchy fur and mottled skin. Isabella acted on pure, survivalist instinct. She didn't think. She grabbed the solid oak bedside lamp, yanking its cord from the wall just as the window exploded inward. Shards of glass rained into the room, twinkling like lethal rain in the moonlight. The creature hauled itself over the sill, its bulk too large, too wrong for the space. It was her only chance. As it struggled to find its footing on the rug, Isabella swung the heavy base of the lamp with all her strength. It connected with a hollow thunk against the side of the thing's head. It roared, more in surprise than pain, and swatted at her. The blow glanced off her shoulder, but the force was enough to send her spinning into the dresser. Pain lanced up her side. The lamp clattered to the floor. "Feisty," it drooled, advancing. "Kale will enjoy breaking that." The door to the bedroom splintered inwards. Andrew stood in the wreckage, his wolf form massive, golden fur bristling. His muzzle was stained dark, and a deep gash bled along his flank. Behind him, the hallway was a chaos of snarls and crashing furniture. He didn't hesitate. He launched himself at the intruder. The two wolves collided in a whirl of teeth, fur, and monstrous flesh. Isabella scrambled into the corner, pulling her knees to her chest, trying to make herself small. Furniture shattered. A nightstand was crushed to kindling. Andrew was a blur of disciplined fury, but the Shadowfen wolf was brutal, unpredictable, fighting with a deranged strength. What happened next changed everything. Andrew got a crushing grip on the intruder's forearm. With a vicious twist, he pinned the creature. For a second, victory seemed possible. Then the Shadowfen wolf did something Isabella hadn't imagined. It shifted, not fully, but its pinned arm shrunk, becoming human-smooth and slender, slipping from Andrew's jaws. Before Andrew could react, it shifted back, the bone and muscle reforming with a nauseating crack, and drove its now-free claws upward into Andrew's exposed belly. Andrew's agonized whine cut through the noise of battle. He staggered back, crimson blooming across his golden fur. "No!" Isabella screamed. The sound of her voice, her raw terror, seemed to ripple through the very walls of the house. Downstairs, the fighting paused for a split second. And then, from deep in the forest, a howl answered. It was not the sound of a wolf, but of pure, unadulterated rage. It was a sound that shook the window frames and vibrated in Isabella's teeth. Micah. The Shadowfen wolf's head snapped toward the sound. Its triumphant sneer faltered, replaced by a flicker of primal fear. The alpha was coming, and he was coming fast. "This isn't over, little mate," it spat, its eyes locking on Isabella once more. "He can't be everywhere." With a final, defiant snarl at the wounded Andrew, it turned and leapt back through the shattered window, crashing down into the bushes below and vanishing into the tree line. Silence, thick and heavy with the scent of blood and fear, descended upon the room. Isabella crawled to Andrew, her hands trembling. He had shifted back to human form, his face ashen, hands pressed tightly against the ghastly wound in his abdomen. "Andrew," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not your fault," he gritted out, each word a struggle. "Diversion was good, we were complacent." Boots pounded up the stairs. Bianca appeared in the ruined doorway, her clothes torn, a long scratch bleeding down her cheek. Her eyes swept the scene, the destroyed room, the bleeding Andrew. Isabella crouched and unharmed but shaking violently. Her expression was unreadable. "Report!" she barked, kneeling beside Andrew, her hands already applying pressure to his wound with a ruthless efficiency. "One infiltrator, half-shift specialist," Andrew gasped. "Gone to the west. He knew about the mate bond, spoke to her directly." Bianca's gaze sliced to Isabella. "What did he say?" "He said Kale wanted to talk," Isabella recited, the words feeling alien. He said Micah couldn't be everywhere." Bianca's jaw tightened. She gave a sharp whistle and two other warriors appeared. "Get him to the infirmary, now." As they carefully lifted Andrew, she turned her full attention to Isabella. "You're not safe here, not anymore. The house is compromised, we have to move you." "Move me where?" Isabella asked, her mind reeling. The sanctuary was violated. The gilded cage was broken. "Somewhere he can be everywhere," Bianca said, just as the front door of the house slammed open with enough force to shake the foundations. The sound of Micah's return was not a arrival, but an invasion. His rage was a physical force, a pressure in the air that made it hard to breathe. Isabella heard his snarled questions downstairs, the fearful, hurried answers of the pack. Then his footsteps on the stairs, deliberate, heavy, each one a promise of violence. He filled the broken doorway. He was in human form, but only just. Power radiated from him in waves. His eyes, that impossible mercury silver, blazed with a light that was barely civilized. They found Isabella first, a swift, scorching assessment that took in every detail, unharmed, terrified, alive. The inferno in his gaze banked by a fraction. Then he saw the blood on the floor, Andrew's blood, and the shattered window letting in the night. A low, continuous growl emanated from his chest. Bianca, one infiltrator alpha, a half-shift specialist. He targeted her room directly. Andrew intercepted, took a bad wound. The intruder fled west after your howl was heard. The border skirmish was a feint. They knew our response protocol. Bianca's report was clipped, professional, but a thread of shame ran beneath it. Micah's gaze went to the window, to the woods beyond. "Cale is smarter than I gave him credit for." He finally stepped into the room, the wreckage crunching under his boots. He stopped in front of Isabella. He didn't touch her. His control seemed razor-thin. "What did you see?" Isabella made herself meet his eyes. "It was part man, part wolf. It spoke. It called me little mate. It said Cale wanted to talk. It told me to come out." She swallowed. "I hit it with a lamp." A strange, grim flicker passed through Micah's eyes. Pride, fury, both. "Good." The single word was rough. He looked at Bianca. "The perimeter." "Tripled, but Alpha, they scented her here. They know this location. A safe house is no longer safe if its location is known." "We're not using a safe house," Micah said, his voice final. His eyes locked on Isabella again. "You stay with me. From now on, you are in my sight, or you are surrounded by a guard I have personally vetted. There is no middle ground." The command brooked no argument. It should have felt suffocating. But after the terror of the window, after the sight of Andrew's blood, it felt like the only solid ground in a world that had turned to quicksand. She gave a small, numb nod. "Pack a bag, essentials only," Micah ordered. "We leave in 5 minutes." "Leave?" Isabella asked. "Go where?" "The heart of the territory," he said, already turning to issue orders to Bianca. "The war camp. If Cale wants a war over my mate, then he will find us on a battlefield of my choosing, not skulking in a compromised house." The next hour was a blur of grim activity. Isabella shoved a few borrowed clothes into a bag. The atmosphere in the pack house was no longer one of resentful awe toward her, but of sharp, focused fear. The Shadowfen had not just crossed a border. They had pierced the very heart of the Alpha's home. It was an unforgivable insult, a declaration that nothing was sacred. She was led downstairs and outside to where a convoy of rugged vehicles and wolves stood ready. Micah was at the center, a map spread over the hood of a jeep, Bianca and other senior warriors around him. He pointed to a spot deep in the mountains. "Here, the Stone Grove. Defensible high ground, fresh water, and it resonates with pack magic. We make our stand there. Bianca, take the vanguard. Sweep the route. I'll bring up the rear with her." Bianca nodded, casting an inscrutable look at Isabella before shifting and melting into the woods with a team of warriors. Micah opened the passenger door of the jeep. "Get in." The drive was silent, tense. Micah drove with a predatory focus, his eyes constantly scanning the dark tree line. Isabella watched the moonlit world fly by, the familiar road out of Blackwood Creek giving way to rougher, narrower tracks that climbed higher into the mountains. The air grew colder, thinner. After an hour, they arrived at the stone grove. It was not a camp. It was a fortress. Ancient, towering monoliths of gray stone formed a natural amphitheater on a high plateau. Between them, tents were already being erected, fires lit. The air hummed with purpose and low-lying anxiety. Wolves patrolled the high rocks, silhouetted against the moon. This was a place of power and of war. Micah led her to the largest tent, set against the tallest stone. Inside, it was sparse. A bedroll, a simple cot for her, a table with maps, and a small, contained fire pit. His scent was already everywhere, claiming the space. "This is where we stay," he said, his voice slightly less gruff now, edged with exhaustion. "You do not leave this tent unless I am with you. Do you understand?" "I understand," she said quietly. The reality of her situation was settling upon her like a weight. She was a prize, a weapon, and a liability. Her life was now measured in the strength of the wolf beside her. He studied her for a long moment, the wild rage finally receding from his eyes, leaving something more complex. "You hit it with a lamp." The question, so absurd after everything, almost startled a laugh from her. It came out as a choked sob. "It was the only thing I could reach." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "It was brave." He turned away as if the admission cost him. "Rest. Tomorrow the real work begins." "What work?" she asked, sinking onto the cot. He looked back, his silhouette dark against the tent flap. "Keeping you alive, and teaching you what it means to be the mate of an alpha at war." Sleep was impossible. The sounds of the camp were foreign, guttural voices, the shift of bodies, the occasional howl from a sentry. Every rustle of the tent fabric made her jump. She lay in the dark, staring at the shadowed roof, Andrew's pained face flashing behind her eyes. Just before dawn, as the first gray light filtered through the canvas, she heard it. A new sound, distant but carried on the wind from the east. It was not a howl of challenge, but a chorus of them. Dozens of voices, raised in a chilling, synchronized cry that spoke of mobilization, of an army on the move. It was answered, fiercely, by the sentries of the Blackwood pack on the high stones. The tent flap was thrown aside. Micah stood there, backlit by the firelight of the camp. He was fully dressed, his expression carved from granite. "They're here, aren't they?" Isabella whispered, sitting up, her blood running cold. Micah's silver eyes glinted in the dim light. "Not yet, but Cale has gathered his full pack. That was their muster call." He stepped inside, his gaze heavy upon her. "The scout just returned. He brings a message from the Shadowfin Alpha." "What message?" Micah's voice was dangerously quiet. "Cale doesn't just want you captured anymore." He paused, the words hanging in the cold air between them. "He's issued a formal challenge for you, a duel at the border at sunset. The winner claims the mate, and the loser's pack." Isabella's breath caught. "A duel, you can't." "I can and I will," Micah interrupted, his tone leaving no room for debate. "It's the oldest law, but Isabella—" He knelt before her cot, bringing them to eye level. The raw, unvarnished truth was in his eyes now. "There's a condition. For the challenge to be binding, the mate must be present. You have to be there at the border, standing in my sight." He let the implication hang in the air. She would have to be taken to the very edge of the war zone, placed directly in the line of sight of the brutal alpha who wanted to claim her, to watch two beasts fight to the death over a bond she never asked for. If only she had known that was the least of the horrors waiting for her at sunset. The echo of Cale's challenge, a formal, binding duel for her and for an entire pack, hung in the cold mountain air of the stone grove like a physical weight. Sunset. The word was a drumbeat in Isabella's skull. Sunset at the border. You must be present. She was the prize and the witness. If only she had known that running to a sleepy mountain town would make her the fulcrum of a war. The stone grove was not a grove in any sense she understood. It was a fortress of nature, a windswept plateau high above the tree line, surrounded by a ring of ancient, weathered monoliths that hummed with a low, subaudible frequency. The air was thin and sharp. Below, the world was a tapestry of green and gray, but up here, there was only rock, sky, and the pervasive scent of wolf, pine, and tension. The Blackwood pack moved with a grim, silent efficiency, transforming the clearing between the stones into a military encampment. Linta's shelters appeared. A central fire pit was dug. Sentries, in both human and wolf form, took up positions on the high rocks, their silhouettes stark against the pale morning sky. Micah had not left her side. He was a constant, brooding presence, a wall of heat and coiled aggression at her left shoulder. He'd issued no more explanations, just commands delivered in a voice that was gravel and frost. Stay within the circle of the standing stones. Do not approach the eastern edge. Andrew will remain at the central fire. You may check on him, but do not hinder the healer. His eyes, that impossible gold, were fixed not on her, but on the eastern horizon, where the Shadowfen territory lay. The bond between them was a live wire, buzzing with his rage, his strategic calculations, and beneath it all, a terrifying, possessive fear that was entirely for her. It made her skin feel too tight. "You can't seriously consider fighting him on his terms," Bianca said, striding up to them. Her braid was tighter than ever, her leathers dusted with trailed dust. She spared Isabella a glance that was all business. The hostile suspicion was gone, replaced by the cold assessment of a soldier for a key asset. "It's a trap, Micah. You know it is. Cale doesn't fight fair. The oldest law is just a pretty story he's using to get you isolated." "The challenge is binding before the moon," Micah replied, his voice low. "If I refuse, I forfeit by default. He gains the right to claim her and the moral high ground to rally other packs against us as a coward. My authority shatters. The pack fractures. It ends the same way, just slower and with more bloodshed from within." "Then we don't let it get to the duel," Bianca argued, her jaw set. "We mass our forces and hit their muster point now, before sunset." "And violate the ancient right?" Micah finally turned his head, his gaze slicing to her. "We would be no better than them. We would be oath breakers. The pack's spirit would break. No." He shook his head, a sharp, final motion. "The duel is happening. My task is to win it." Isabella couldn't stay silent. The guilt was a rock in her throat, heavier than the mountain air. "This is because of me, all of it. Andrew is hurt because of me. This war, this duel." Micah's hand shot out, gripping her arm, not painfully, but with an intensity that stole her breath. "Look at me." She forced her eyes to his. The gold was molten. "This is because of Cale's ambition. It is because a bond this powerful is a beacon. It is because I am Alpha. You are the spark, Isabella. You are not the flame, nor the wind that spreads it. Do not carry the burden of the arsonist. That is mine to bear." His words were meant to absolve her, but they only cemented her role. A spark was still necessary for the fire. The sound of a pained groan carried from near the central fire pit, where Andrew lay wrapped in thick furs, his torso bandaged. The healer, an older woman with knowing eyes, was applying a poultice that smelled of bitter herbs and pine resin. Isabella pulled away from Micah's grip. "I need to sit by the fire." It wasn't a request. It was a statement of a need for 1 minute of stillness that wasn't next to his overwhelming presence. He gave a single, curt nod, his eyes already tracking back to the east. "Bianca." "On her," Bianca confirmed, falling into step beside Isabella as she walked the short distance to the fire. The warmth was a relief against the high-altitude chill. Andrew's face was pale, but he managed a weak smile as Isabella knelt beside him. "Don't look so grim," he whispered, his voice raspy. Healing fast, promise. I'm so sorry, Andrew, she said, the words inadequate. Not your fault, he insisted, then coughed. The Shadowfen, they're monsters. Half shifting like that, it's an abomination. Unnatural speed, but it burns them out, makes them unpredictable. He winced as the healer adjusted his bandages. Micah will win. He has to. Bianca stood over them, her arms crossed. He's right about one thing. Kale's pack specializes in that half form. It's their signature. It gives them a brutal, chaotic advantage in close quarters. They can shift a claw, a jaw in the blink of an eye, but it makes them sloppy. All rage, no control. She looked down at Isabella. Micah's strength is his full control. His wolf and his man are one. That's what makes him alpha. But in a duel to the death, against a rabid dog control, can be a disadvantage. The day bled away, hour by torturous hour. The sun climbed, a cold, distant coin in the sky. Isabella watched the pack prepare. Weapons were checked, not guns, but silver-tipped spears and knives. The air thrummed with silent communication, growls and subtle shifts in posture that spoke volumes. She felt like a ghost among them, seen but not part of the organism. The mate of the alpha, yet utterly separate. As the afternoon began to wane, casting long shadows from the monoliths, Micah called her to him. He stood at the very center of the stone grove, where the humming from the stones was strongest. "It is time," he said. His human form seemed to vibrate with restrained power. Around them, the pack gathered in a wide, silent circle. Dozens of pairs of eyes, in human and wolf faces, watched them. "What happens now?" Isabella asked, her voice small. "We go to the border. You will be placed under heavy guard behind our front line. You will see everything." His expression was carved from granite. "No matter what you see, you do not leave that circle of guards. You do not run, you do not speak, you witness. That is the condition." "And if you lose?" The question escaped, a terrified whisper. The circle of wolves let out a collective, low growl. Micah's eyes flashed. "I will not lose." He said it not as a boast, but as a statement of absolute fact, a decree. "But if the moon turns her face from me, Kale's claim on you becomes enforceable by the law." The pack. He paused, the first real crack in his armor she'd seen. The Blackwood pack would be his. They would follow him or be slaughtered. There is no in-between. The consequence of it all crashed down on her. It wasn't just her life. It was the lives of everyone here, Bianca, Andrew, the healer, even the resentful ones. All balanced on the outcome of a fight she had drawn to them. The weight was crushing. "I'm ready," she lied. The journey to the border was a silent, grim procession. They moved through narrow mountain passes, along ridges that dropped away into dizzying ravines. The wolves flowed around her, a protective, living barrier. Micah led, always ahead, a dark and focused figure. The sound of their passage was the scuff of boots on stone, the pant of wolf breath, the whisper of wind through the firs. Then the trees thinned. They emerged onto a broad, rocky bluff overlooking a deep, mist-filled canyon. This was the border. On the far side of the canyon, on another bluff, a mass of dark shapes gathered. The Shadowfen pack. Even at this distance, Isabella could feel the difference. Their energy was jagged, hungry, a palpable malice that carried on the wind. A giant, scarred figure stood at their forefront. Kale. He raised a hand, a mocking salute. Micah didn't acknowledge it. He turned to his pack, his voice carrying clear and strong in the twilight. "Hold the line. Protect your Luna. No matter what you see or hear from over there, you hold." Bianca stepped forward, a silver-tipped spear in her hand. "We hold, Alpha." She then gripped Isabella's elbow, guiding her to a semicircle of 8 massive warriors, all in human form but radiating wolfish threat. "You stay here." In the center, you see that rock? She pointed to a flat, table-like stone just before the edge of their bluff. That is the dueling ground. Do not take your eyes off it. The sun was a sliver of fire on the horizon, painting the world in blood and gold. The canyon between the packs was a river of shadow. On the far side, Kale began to strip off his vest, his movements exaggerated, confident. He was bigger than Micah, layered with muscle and old, silvery scars that gleamed in the dying light. Micah, closer to her, did the same with a lethal economy of motion. His back was to her, a landscape of taut muscle and old scars of his own. The setting sun gilded the lines of his body. He turned his head just slightly, and his eyes found hers across the distance. In that look was a universe of unspoken things, a promise, a regret, a fierce, possessive claim. Then he stepped forward, toward the flat rock that bridged the very edge of their territory. Kale leaped. It wasn't a jump, it was a propulsion. He cleared a terrifying distance from his bluff, landing on the dueling rock with a crack that echoed through the canyon. He was already changing, but not like Micah, who shifted in a beautiful, terrifying flow of muscle and fur. Kale's transformation was a violent, jerking series of snaps. His jaw elongated, then snapped back. A clawed hand, then a human one. He was a shuddering, unstable thing, caught between forms, his eyes rolling with madness and pain. The half shift. Micah shifted completely. One moment a man, the next, the majestic, powerful black wolf with eyes of gold. He landed silently on the stone, facing the monstrous, hybrid creature that was Kale. No signal was given. They collided. The sound was horrific, a cacophony of snarls, the crunch of bone on rock, the wet tear of claws finding purchase. Kale was a whirlwind of unpredictable violence, striking from impossible angles, his form flickering. He'd lash out with a fully wolfen maw, then pivot and drive a human elbow into Micah's ribs. Micah fought with controlled, powerful precision, a master tactician against a force of chaos. He took blows, but gave worse, his teeth sinking deep into Kale's shoulder, shaking him like a rag doll. Isabella watched, her hand clamped over her mouth, her heart hammering against her ribs. The bond was a storm of pain, fury, and calculated focus. She felt every impact on Micah as a phantom shock in her own body. Bianca's grip on her arm was iron-tight. "He's tiring him out," Bianca muttered, her eyes glued to the fight. "The half-shift burns energy fast. Micah knows he's weathering the storm." It seemed to be true. Kale's initial frenzy began to slow, his movements becoming less precise, more ragged. Micah, bleeding from several gashes but moving with relentless purpose, pressed his advantage. He drove Kale back toward the edge of the rock overlooking the deep canyon. Victory seemed imminent. What happened next changed everything. Kale, backed to the very edge, let out a guttural, laughing howl that was more man than beast. "You fight for a human," he screamed, spitting blood. "You weaken your bloodline. You are not an alpha. You are a sentimental fool." And then he did the unthinkable. He broke from the fight, not to flee, but to turn his back on Micah completely. He fixed his wild, rolling eyes directly on Isabella across the gap. He pointed a clawed, trembling finger at her. "She is the prize. Why wait for the end?" With a final, explosive burst of that unnatural speed, Kale didn't leap back to his own lines. He launched himself across the canyon, not toward Micah, but straight toward the bluff where Isabella stood surrounded by her guards. A roar of pure, unadulterated rage erupted from Micah's wolf form. He leaped in pursuit, but Kale had the head start, driven by madness and a singular, twisted goal. "Shield HER," Bianca screamed, shoving Isabella down and raising her spear. The 8 guards closed ranks, a wall of flesh and fury. Kale landed among them like a meteor, half-wolf, half-man, all terror. He moved in a blur, disarming one guard with a snapped wrist, slashing another across the throat with a flick of a partially shifted claw. The line buckled. Isabella saw it all in horrifying slow motion. The chaos, the blood, Bianca engaging Kale, her spear a silver streak, and Micah landing behind Kale, his wolf form a vision of apocalyptic wrath. But Kale wasn't trying to win the fight with the guards. He was creating an opening. As Micah's jaws closed toward the back of his neck, Kale ducked, twisted, and with one last, desperate surge, his fully human hand, stretched out, fingers hooked, shot through the gap in the guards. It wasn't a killing blow. It was a grab. His fingers tangled violently in Isabella's hair, yanking her forward with brutal force off her feet. She screamed, the pain blinding. For one dizzying second, she was suspended between the protective circle of Blackwood guards and the abyssal drop of the canyon edge, Kale's mad eyes inches from hers, his hot, bloody breath on her face. "Mine," he gurgled. Then two things happened at once. Micah's wolf, moving faster than thought, clamped his jaws not on Kale, but on Kale's extended arm at the shoulder. There was a sickening, wet crunch, and the edge of the bluff, weakened by the struggle and their combined weight, gave way. The world upended. Rock shattered. Isabella felt the terrible pull of gravity, the scream ripped from her throat. Kale's grip in her hair was an anchor dragging her down. But Micah's jaws were a vice on Kale's arm, and Micah was not letting go. They fell, a tangled, snarling, screaming mass of alpha, challenger, and mate, into the deep, mist-shrouded darkness of the border canyon. The last thing Isabella heard before the roaring wind consumed everything was Bianca's shattered cry from high above, and the chilling, triumphant howl of the Shadowfen pack seeing their alpha drag his rival, and the prize into the abyss. Then impact. A shocking, cold, breath-stealing blast of water. They had not fallen onto rocks. They had plunged into the icy, black, subterranean river that snaked through the canyon floor. The current was a monster. It seized them, whirling the three entangled bodies in a violent, deafening rush. Kale's grip was finally torn from her hair. She was free, but lost, tumbling end over end in the freezing, pitch-dark water. She fought for the surface, lungs burning, disoriented. Her head broke through into air and chaos. She gasped, choking on water. She saw flashes in the gloom, the massive black shape of Micah's wolf still locked on a thrashing Kale, the white foam of the rapids, the sheer, unclimbable walls of the canyon racing past. Ahead, the roar of the water intensified to a thunder. The river was funneling, dropping away. Waterfall. The realization was a bolt of pure terror. She had 1 second to suck in a desperate breath before the river vanished from beneath her, and she was airborne again, falling into a deeper, colder dark. The plunge seemed to last forever. She hit a deep pool with a force that drove the air from her lungs and consciousness from her mind. The current, less furious here, still pulled her. She sank, the world fading to a silent, black cold. Something solid and powerful slammed into her. Not rock, fur. An arm, thick and strong as a tree root, wrapped around her waist, dragging her upward. They broke the surface. She coughed, vomiting river water, her body shuddering violently with cold and shock. She was held against a solid, human chest. Micah. He was back in human form, bleeding from countless wounds, his breathing ragged, his eyes scanning the darkness with a frantic intensity. They were in a cavern, lit only by a faint phosphorescence from fungi on the walls. The pool they were in fed a slower-moving stream that disappeared into a tunnel. The roar of the waterfall was a distant thunder behind them. Of Kale, there was no sign. Swallowed by the river or lurking in the dark. Micah hauled her to a shallow, rocky shelf collapsing beside her. The bond was a raw, open wound of fear and fury. He cupped her face, his hands trembling. "Are you hurt? Speak to me." She could only shake her head, teeth chattering. He pulled her into the heat of his body, trying to warm her. His scent, wolf, blood, and river, was the only anchor in a world gone mad. After a moment, his head lifted, his ears pricked for sounds she couldn't hear. His body went rigid, not with fear, with a dawning, grim realization. "The duel," he said, his voice a hollow echo in the cavern. "It was not concluded. By the oldest law, it is still active." He looked down at her, his golden eyes reflecting the eerie fungal light. "And we are not alone down here." From the dark tunnel ahead, where the stream flowed, came a sound. A wet, dragging footstep. Then a low, pained but utterly venomous chuckle that echoed off the stone. Cale had survived the fall. The venomous chuckle echoed off the phosphorescent cavern walls, a sound of pure, predatory delight. Cale was alive. The thought was a spike of ice in Isabella's chest, colder than the water soaking her clothes. Micah's body went rigid against hers, a low, answering growl vibrating from his throat into her back. The duel wasn't over. It was just beginning in the dark. "Micah," she whispered, her voice a frayed thread. "Don't move," he breathed back, his lips against her ear. His arms tightened around her, but it wasn't an embrace. It was a positioning. He was shifting her slowly, putting his own body between her and the direction of the sound. The mate bond was a live wire between them, humming with his fury and a protective fear so vast it stole her breath. She felt his assessment of their situation, his own bruised ribs, her shivering form, the unknown terrain, the enemy in the shadows. The calculation was grim. From the tunnel mouth, Cale's voice slithered out, raw and ragged but triumphant. "The moon has a sense of humor, Blackwood. She drops us into a pit to finish our private conversation." Micah eased Isabella behind him, rising to his feet with a wince she felt in her own side. He stood naked and bleeding in the eerie light, but his authority was a tangible force. "The duel was on the bluff, Cale. You broke the law when you targeted her." A wet, hacking cough was the reply, followed by a scrape of claws on stone. The oldest law is strength, and look where yours has gotten you." Cale's form began to coalesce in the tunnel entrance, dragging one leg. He was in a painful-looking half-shift, his face elongated but human enough to wear a grotesque smile. One arm was clearly broken, hanging at a wrong angle. Alone, trapped, with a liability. Isabella's fear curdled into anger. A liability. That's all she was to him, to so many of them. A tool. A weakness to exploit. The memory of Andrew's blood on the pack house floor flashed behind her eyes. No more. "I am not your prize," she said, the words leaving her before she could stop them. Both alphas went still. She pushed herself up, ignoring the protest in her ankle, and stood beside Micah, not behind him. His gaze snapped to her, a silent command to be silent, to be still. She ignored that too. "This is not about me. It's about your hunger, your sickness." Cale's laugh was a short, sharp bark. "You hear that, Micah? Your little human has a tongue. I'll enjoy biting it out." What happened next changed everything. Micah didn't roar. He didn't shift. He took a single, deliberate step forward, placing himself fully in front of Isabella, and spoke with a quiet that was more terrifying than any shout. "You will not speak to her. You will not look at her. Your challenge is with me, so come, finish it." The air crackled. Cale's wounded animal eyes darted between them, sensing a shift he didn't understand. The mate bond wasn't just a pull. It was a fortress Micah was building around her with his will alone. Cale snarled, a sound of frustration. He was wounded, possibly worse than Micah. A direct fight was a gamble. He chose cunning instead. With a speed that belied his injuries, Cale lunged, not at Micah, but at the cavern wall beside the tunnel. His good hand, clawed and powerful, slammed into a cluster of the glowing fungal growths. They exploded in a cloud of phosphorescent spores, filling the chamber with a blinding, glittering haze. Isabella gasped, her eyes burning. She heard Micah's snarl of surprise, heard the scuffle of movement. Kale was using the spore cloud as cover. "Micah," she choked out. A heavy body collided with hers, but it was Micah, wrapping around her and spinning them both away. Claws whistled through the air where her head had been. Kale was using the haze to get to her, to break Micah's focus. The spores settled slowly, revealing the cavern in patches. Kale was a shifting shadow, circling. "You see," Kale taunted, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "You cannot fight me and shield her. The bond makes you weak. It splits your focus. It is a flaw." Micah's breath was hot on her neck. "It is my strength," he muttered, but it was for her alone. His mind was racing, she could feel it. They were cornered. The pool was behind them, the tunnels ahead were Kale's domain in the gloom. They had no weapons, no pack. Think, Isabella, think. The cavern, the light, the water. Her eyes, stinging, scanned their prison. The phosphorescent growths clung to the walls and ceiling, fed by the moisture. The stream that had brought them in flowed out through a narrow, low channel on the far side, too small for a man, barely large enough for the water. An idea, desperate and half-formed, flickered. "The light," she whispered urgently into Micah's ear. "He needs the shadows." Micah understood instantly. His head lifted, tracking Kale's movements by sound and scent alone. "The stream exit," he breathed back. "When I move, you run for it, try to fit." "Go. No, Isabella." His voice was alpha, final and absolute. "You will run." Before she could argue, he moved. He didn't charge Kale. He veered to the left, toward the cavern wall, and in a display of sheer, brutal strength, he dug his fingers into the stone and ripped a massive, glowing cluster of fungi from its hold. He hurled it like a comet across the cavern. It smashed against the wall near Kale's last position, exploding in a nova of light that illuminated the entire chamber. Kale flinched, his eyes, more sensitive in half-shift, searing from the sudden brightness. He roared in pain and disorientation. "Now!" Isabella ran. Her ankles screamed, but terror lent her wings. She splashed through the shallow edge of the pool toward the narrow stream exit. Behind her, the sounds of combat erupted, snarls, the crunch of impact, a yelp of pain that was unmistakably Kale's. She reached the exit. It was a jagged crack in the rock, water gushing out. It was far too small. Despair clawed at her. It was a dead end. She turned, ready to tell Micah, ready to face whatever came next with him. The sight that met her eyes froze the blood in her veins. Micah had Kale pinned against the wall, his forearm under the Shadowfin Alpha's throat. Micah was fully shifted now, a giant, silver-black wolf of immense power, his fur matted with blood and water. Kale, still in his unstable half-form, was clawing at Micah's foreleg, but his strength was fading. Victory was inches away. But Kale's broken, twisted face was turned toward Isabella, and he was smiling. "You lose," Kale gurgled, his eyes locking on hers over Micah's massive shoulder. His free hand, the broken one, shot out. Not to attack Micah, but to slam into another, larger patch of the glowing fungi on the wall above them. This one was enormous, a ceiling of soft light. It didn't just release spores. The entire massive growth, weakened by the impact and the earlier violence, tore free from the ceiling. If only I had known what that light truly was, not just a fungus, a weight, a weapon. Time seemed to slow. Isabella saw the colossal, glowing mass plummet. She saw Micah, focused on the kill, sense the danger a fraction too late. She screamed a warning that was lost in the thunderous crash. The world dissolved in sound and light and shattered stone. The impact threw Isabella off her feet, back into the cold pool. Water flooded her mouth and nose. She surfaced, choking, her ears ringing. The cavern was transformed. Dust and dying phosphorescence filled the air. A mountain of broken rock and pulverized fungus now lay between her and the far wall, where Micah and Cale had been. "Micah!" The scream tore from her raw throat. Silence, then a weak scraping sound from the other side of the rubble. A human groan. She scrambled, slipping on the stones, clawing her way toward the sound. "Micah, answer me." She rounded the edge of the rockfall. The scene was one of carnage. Cale lay on his back, half buried, his chest crushed by a boulder the size of a table. His eyes were open, unseeing, the vicious light finally gone from them. The Shadowfen Alpha was dead. A few feet away, Micah lay on his side, back in human form. He was covered in pale dust and dark blood, one leg trapped under a smaller but still massive chunk of stone. His eyes were closed. A sob ripped from Isabella. She fell to her knees beside him, her hands fluttering over his chest, feeling for a heartbeat. It was there, thready, but there. "No, no, no, look at me. Micah, please look at me." His eyelids fluttered. A pained breath escaped his lips. His gaze found hers, clouded with pain but fiercely present. "Isabella!" His hand moved, finding hers and gripping it with surprising strength. "You're safe. You're hurt, your leg. Cale? Gone, he's gone." A profound relief washed through the bond, followed immediately by a wave of agony from his crushed limb. He grimaced, his head falling back. "The pack, they'll be searching. The bond, they'll feel it. They'll find the canyon. We have to get this off you first." She stood, assessing the rock pinning his leg. It was too heavy. Impossible. Despair threatened again. They had survived Cale only to be slowly crushed by the mountain itself. Micah's voice was a strained whisper. "The stream, the channel, you tried. It's too small, we're trapped." He closed his eyes, his jaw tight. The bond was flooding with his frustration, his rage at his own helplessness, his terror for her. "I'm sorry," he gritted out. "I brought you to this." His apology shattered something in her. This powerful, terrifying alpha, broken and apologizing. For her. The anger that had been simmering since the diner, the fear, the confusion, it all fused into a single, white-hot point of determination. "No," she said, her voice suddenly steady. She looked at the rock, then at the narrow stream exit. "You didn't bring me here. The bond did. Fate did. And I am not dying in this hole." She waded back into the pool, to the stream exit. She studied it not with the eyes of a terrified human, but with the desperate logic of someone fighting for her mate's life. The water flowed out, which meant there was somewhere for it to go. An opening, maybe it widened on the other side. She turned back to Micah. "The water is flowing out. There has to be a way." "You can't fit," he said, his voice fading. "Not yet." She walked to the rubble pile, ignoring the pain in her ankle, and began searching. She found what she was looking for near Cale's body, a long, sharp shard of stone that had sheared off in the collapse. A crude lever, she returned to Micah's side. "I'm going to try to move the rock." "Isabella, no, it's too. I have to." She wedged the stone lever under the edge of the boulder, pinning his leg. She planted her feet, wrapped her hands around the other end, and pulled with every ounce of strength she possessed. A scream of effort tore from her throat. Her muscles burned. The world narrowed to the stone, to Micah's leg, to the faint, hopeful groan of shifting rock. It moved. A centimeter. Then two. Micah, seeing her struggle, braced his hands against the ground and pushed with his free leg, adding his own waning strength to hers. A guttural roar of pain and effort burst from him. The boulder tilted, rolled just enough. "Now, pull your leg." He did, dragging his mangled leg free with a cry that echoed in the cavern. The boulder settled back with a final, definitive thud. Isabella dropped the lever, collapsing beside him, her breath coming in ragged sobs. She looked at his leg. It was a mess, bruised, bleeding, possibly broken. But it was free. Micah was staring at her, his expression one of awe and something deeper, something that made the mate bond sing a clear, strong note amidst the pain. "You are incredible." A new sound reached them then. Faint but unmistakable, not water. Voices, shouting, carried on the air from the stream channel. "Hello, is anyone down there? Alpha?" It was Bianca's voice, sharp with fear and hope. Isabella scrambled to the stream exit. "BIANCA, here, we're here, in the cavern." The voices erupted in a clamor. "We hear you, hold on, we're following the water." Rescue was minutes away. But they were minutes Micah might not have. He was shivering violently, shock and blood loss setting in. Isabella crawled back to him, stripping off her own soaked, torn sweater. She used the least wet part to press against the worst of the gashes on his leg, then lay down beside him, wrapping her arms around his torso, trying to share what little warmth she had left. "They're coming," she whispered, her face pressed against his cold chest. "Just hold on, your pack is coming." His hand came up, his fingers tangling in her wet hair. "Our pack," he corrected, his voice a faint rumble. "You are my mate. By the moon and by my blood. You fought for me. You are Blackwood." The words settled over her, not as a cage, but as a truth she could finally, fully accept. She was his. He was hers. This terrifying, beautiful, brutal world was hers now, too. The sounds from the tunnel grew louder, splashing, the scrape of gear, the rich scent of wolves. Light, real electric torchlight, speared the gloom from the stream exit. Figures began to emerge, shifting from wolf to human form as they entered the cavern. Bianca, her face etched with worry, Andrew limping but determined, and a dozen other Blackwood warriors. Bianca's torchlight swept the cavern, finding Cale's body, then landing on them. Her stern face crumpled with relief. "Moon and stars, you're alive." They descended on Micah with practiced efficiency, assessing his wounds, fashioning a litter from a cloak and spears. Bianca knelt beside Isabella, draping a dry blanket over her shoulders. Her eyes, usually so hard, were soft. "You kept him alive." "He kept me alive," Isabella said, her gaze never leaving Micah as they carefully lifted him. Bianca helped her stand. "It's the same thing." The journey out was a blur of narrow, water-carved tunnels, strong hands guiding her, and the constant, reassuring pulse of the mate bond, growing stronger as Micah was treated with poultices and bandages by his pack. They emerged not at the canyon bottom, but a mile downstream, where the subterranean river met the open air. The night sky was a breathtaking tapestry of stars, the air sweet and clean. The entire Blackwood pack was there, a sea of anxious faces illuminated by torches and headlights. A collective roar went up as they saw their alpha, wounded but alive, and Isabella beside him. It was not a roar of challenge, but of triumph, of unity. At the forefront stood the giant wolf who had once been with Dominic. He lowered his head in a deep, respectful bow, first to Micah, then, to Isabella's shock, to her. Micah, on his litter, raised a hand for silence. The crowd stilled. His voice, though weak, carried on the mountain wind. "The Shadowfen Alpha is dead. His challenge is ended. The duel is won." He turned his head, finding Isabella in the crowd. His eyes, silver in the torchlight, held hers. "By the strength of the Blackwood pack, and by the heart of your Alpha's mate." This time, the roar that shook the mountains was for her. Weeks later, autumn painting the Blackwood territory in fire and gold, Isabella stood on the porch of the pack house. Her ankle was healed. The fear was a memory. The bond was a constant, warm hum in her chest, a conversation of emotions and quiet thoughts. The door opened behind her. Micah stepped out, his legs still in a brace but bearing weight. The physical wounds were healing. The ones inside, the ones they shared, were knitting together, stronger for having been tested. He came to stand beside her, his presence a solid comfort. Below, in the clearing, the pack was preparing for the evening gathering. She saw Bianca drilling a group of young warriors, her voice carrying sharp commands and rare praise. She saw Andrew, fully recovered, laughing with others by the fire. The giant wolf, whose name she now knew was Gareth, nodded to her from across the yard. "They respect you," Micah said quietly. "They tolerate me," she corrected with a small smile. "But respect, that's growing. It has to be earned." "You earned it in the dark," he said, his hand finding hers. "When you picked up that stone, when you refused to let go." She leaned into him, watching her pack prepare for the night. She was no longer the Alpha King's vanished mate. She was found. She was home. She was Isabella of Blackwood, and her story was just beginning. The end.